Well, as you now know, that's 8 with 17 zeros after it. When you take out that peta and just go with the unit. You could have also reported it as 1 millisievert per year, which is what 2/3 of those exposed received. Or 5 millisieverts per year, which is what 98% of those exposed received. Oh, Becquerels, sieverts, what do these even mean? I mean, radiation's just statistics, the only thing worse than lies and damned lies. But we need a baseline. That's what you get from just walking the Earth 1 year. 2.4 millisieverts per year. Guess which one was used in headlines? It was the 17 zeros. So as you may now be guessing, this is Zachary Karmiol's unabashedly pro-nuclear talk. Wait, please hear me out. I promise it takes like 10 minutes. It's a good idea. And what is a Becquerel, first of all? It's a decay per second. It doesn't matter whether it's alpha, beta, gamma. It doesn't take into account what those different radiations do. And we don't measure things in atoms like this for a very good reason. 8 with 17 zeros after it, atoms, less than half a gram of material. We do have to discuss the very obvious disasters that loom large in nuclear energy, and that's Fukushima and Chernobyl. Let's take a little bit to look at that information. This graph, after the events circulated widely, and rightfully so, it's directly responsible for the events at Fukushima, but the devil's in the details again. The units are centimeters, as in wave height. This is the tsunami. This has nothing to do with radiation. Putting this side by side with the story about radiation is at best misleading. This next graph can't even pretend to just be misleading. It's a blatant falsehood. I don't know who made it or why it was circulated at all, because if you look at those units, rads, another esoteric measure of radiation, well, I'm pretty sure this isn't real because I don't remember everyone on the west coast of North America dying. If this were real, well, we wouldn't be here discussing it today. In the wake of a disaster, disseminating graphs like this is despicable. This is real, though. 70% increase in cancer rates for thyroid cancer to female infants that were exposed. What that relates to is a 0.7% chance of developing thyroid cancer. Well, that was increased to a 1.2% chance. That's not to downplay that. Those are human lives. That does matter. But when you say 70% increase in cancer versus 0.5% increase in the likelihood of developing cancer, you've used the same information to tell two very different stories. Chernobyl, significantly more disastrous than Fukushima. But after 20 years, the World Health Organization determined less than 50 deaths as a result. And in the 10 years since, there's been an additional less than 10. Again, that is a tragedy. That's 50 human lives. That matters. But if I'd asked you when you were filing in here today, how many people died as a result of Chernobyl? I have a feeling 50 wouldn't have even scratched the low end of the guesses. We look at how they failed. Fukushima failed because there was a loss of coolant. The pumps broke, couldn't cool down the reactor. It melted. Chernobyl, they intentionally made it melt. They identified how to melt down a core and said, well, let's try that. Guess what? It worked. No one wants to build Soviet-era reactors anymore. We're building Generation 3+ reactors. That's what's being installed in Georgia right now. The plus stands for passive safety, because you can't turn gravity off, and you don't need outside active coolant to keep your coolant core. You still have waste, though. Nuclear waste is absolutely an issue. But what comes out of a reactor, 97% by volume, is low-level waste, low-level radiation that you don't need to put into something like Yucca Mountain. But it does have the rest, that high-level waste, highly radioactive, 250,000-year lifetime. Of course, you could burn it, 300-year lifetime, put it in a fast reactor, and that's not some fever dream of future technology. We invented it here in the United States at Oak Ridge National Labs, at Idaho National Labs in the 50s. We ran reactors that could do this for 20 years. But, okay, you don't want to build new fast reactors. That's fine. This Frenchman, this charmingly dashing Frenchman, It's telling us of two processes the French use to reduce their waste by 85%. They do it at Hague every year, 1,700 tons of nuclear waste turned into glass. That's 80 to 100 reactors. In the United States, we run 100 reactors. That's a commercial process that has been used for over 30 years to effectively reduce the volume of waste by 85% and recover usable nuclear fuel. At the end of the day, though, we do have to worry about weapons. It's how the world was introduced to the words atomic, to the words nuclear. They've been forever tied. If we'd been introduced to petroleum through napalm, do you really think you'd go down to the corner store and fill up your car? I don't see a lot of people being abject against biology and chemistry just because there are biological or chemical weapons. In fact, nuclear power has done more for disarmament than anything else. The megatons to megawatts program, it was brokered by the first Bush to hold office, signed into law by Clinton, went through the second Bush to hold office, and I'm sure when the second Clinton holds office, we'll do something similar. In the 20 years that we did this program, 10% of all US electricity came from Soviet warheads. That's not 10% of nuclear electricity. 10% over the past 20 years of electricity generated in the United States came from decommissioned Soviet warheads to the tune of 20,000 weapons. You want to make disarmament profitable? Heat your homes with it. We could just shut down the nuclear reactors. Two countries, Japan and Germany, have taken this track. Let's see how that's going. In Japan, according to the original Kyoto Protocol, they wanted to reduce their CO2 emissions by 25% by the year 2020 compared to 1990 levels. After shutting their entire fleet of nuclear reactors, their new goal, fingers crossed, only increase 3%. It's a 28% swing in CO2 at a time we can't really be affording to dump more carbon into the atmosphere. They're not doing so well either. Just from coal alone in the past 2 years, they've increased their CO2 emissions by 5.4%. Germany, in 1990, after the events at Chernobyl, said, we want to get off nuclear power, heavily invest in renewables at minimal cost. But solar, wind, fantastic ideas, not capable of carrying baseload power. So they installed a whole heck of a lot of coal. Up until they shut down half their fleet, Germany had reduced their CO2 by 23.8% compared to 1990 levels. And after shutting only half their fleet down, a 2.7% increase in the past 2 years alone. There is a price to be paid. We can look at the costs, economic, and get cheap, already manufactured, highly reactive warheads and take them out. The environmental costs of CO2, and that's share someone else's presentation. We can look at the health costs. Because again, according to the World Health Organization, the particulate matter released by coal plants is responsible for 100 deaths per every terawatt hour that that plant runs. And so Germany, which had 20 years to plan for this, did the best they could, and it worked very well for what they were actually trying to achieve. But with the installed new power, that's 7,000 deaths. 7,000 deaths from 1 year, one country. That's as real as those that died at Fukushima and Chernobyl. We have to take that into account when we try to go away from such an energy-dense resource like nuclear power. Now, I know 10 minutes is not long enough to change hard-held beliefs. I'm not asking you to be a proponent of nuclear energy like I am. I just want, next time this is discussed, maybe have a little bit open ears, opener eyes. Be willing to revisit it. What 10 minutes is long enough to do, however, is irradiate myself to the tune of 18,000 Becquerel. Well, we know now that's actually not that much, but if you saw that in the top of a headline, it might catch your eye. How'd I do that? That's not just what you get naturally. Well, I am very, very happy to see all of you here today, but I do have to admit, it's a banana in my pocket. Not that lucky. The potassium in here is radioactive. And trust me, I didn't risk anything by keeping it in there. If we're to be responsible citizens, we have to be willing to look at new options. We have to, with honest appraisal of the merits and benefits of a carbon-neutral energy source with domestically provided fuel. Thank you.